Are you a button pusher? Are you someone who gets your buttons pushed quite regularly? I think we all can relate to pressing someone's buttons. Sometimes it's just in fun. For example, if I go grab a bag of chips and sit down next to my husband, I know it's going to make him cringe. He absolutely hates the sound of chewing, but he also knows I'm doing it in fun and I'm going to get up and move eventually. On the other hand, sometimes we get our buttons pushed unintentionally or push other people's buttons unintentionally because we come from different backgrounds, different experiences, and we have different expectations, different boundaries, different moral values, and different viewpoints. And these things can make relationships difficult. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about navigating difficult relationships. When is it time to end a relationship? How do we let that person go? And what things are interfering with our relationships that are making them a little more tricky than maybe they need to be. There are some definite strategies in here, so stick around and please stay till the end. My guest shares such a powerful testimony about how Mary has worked in her life, and I really don't want you to miss it. It is worth the wait. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Persistence in Prayer podcast hosted by Catholic mindset coach, wife, mother, educator, and speaker Kylie Hein. Kylie is passionate about helping you deepen your relationship with God through the power of prayer. This podcast is a space for high achievers who want to do it all, but also want to prioritize their spiritual life and grow in faith. Join us as we explore the beauty of persistence in prayer and the transformative impact it can have on our lives. Get ready to discover practical tips, insights, and inspiration to help you develop a daily prayer practice and cultivate a deeper sense of trust in God's plan for your life. Let's journey together towards a more fulfilled and faithful life as we invite the Holy Spirit in. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I am joined by Eileen Tully. She is the founder of an apostolate to help women find healing called Sorsom Korda. She speaks directly to the experience of pregnancy and child loss, since her own life has been affected by these uniquely painful losses. But she also has found healing from other wounds in her life and seeks to help women find healing in their relationships with God, themselves, and others. Eileen and her husband Patrick live with their 6 children in rural New Hampshire and have 4 children who intercede for them from heaven. Oh, I love that you added that. That's so beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, they're part of our family too.
Yes.
So yeah. I think we forget that sometimes, and I love that I can ask for their intercession.
I think it's so beautiful, and I don't know if your kids do this, but my kids will bring up, I had a miscarriage, and they'll always talk about baby Jude, or they'll just pray for
Yeah.
baby Jude, and it just kinda warms my heart a little bit.
Yes. Well, I am like one of the few people I know who has my daughter as my confirmation saint because
Really?
my daughter was an infant who had been baptized when she died, and so I know that she is in heaven. Like, confidently, and I got to know her because she lived for almost 7 weeks, but then I also didn't get confirmed until I was an adult, until after she died. So, I asked the priest if I could use it's her name is Bridget, so I said Saint Bridget, but I said, "Actually, like, when I say that, I'm thinking of my daughter who I know is in heaven and can intercede for me," and he was like, "I don't know why not." Like, that's that's okay. So in my mind, there is, of course, Saint Bridget too, she was named after, but I chose Saint Bridget to be our Bridget. So it's amazing to me that I have someone in heaven who knows me personally, inside and out, and loves me
Yes.
personally, and has a vested interest in my getting to heaven, who is my confirmation saint, like,
Yeah.
just so neat. Yeah.
That's not the topic that we're gonna dig
No,
deep
it's
into
not.
today,
Sorry.
but no, but I
I
just
took a
am
detour.
I just wanted to say I'm so glad that you mentioned it because this is your realm of work, and it is something that I think is not talked about enough. I know before I had my miscarriage, there were a very, very small number of women who I knew that had been through that experience, but after you have one, all these people start coming up to you and sharing their experiences, and
Yes.
you just don't realize how many other people have endured that same suffering.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there are not very many resources even now for people going through that, or at least I don't find that the church is equipped to point people out to, to say, here are some places that might be helpful to you, right? Like when somebody goes through that. And I would say there, if there aren't a lot for women, there are even fewer for men, which is, just so challenging. But it's something that really affects us. I've had women come to my retreat who have had a miscarriage 20 plus years ago and never really just processed it and healed from it, or had just lingering questions about just about the experience and about where the baby was. And, just so many people just, they don't always feel comfortable sharing that they've gone through that. And then they don't know where to turn to find help and support when they have. So that's that's what I do.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
part of what I do. Yeah.
minimizing sometimes women minimize their experience as well
Yes.
based on how far
Yes.
along they are.
Of
Like, well,
course.
mine wasn't as bad as
Absolutely.
theirs because their baby was almost full term or it was a
Yes.
stillborn or something along those lines. I think that that's another thing that happens too is we minimize our suffering because we compare it to someone else's.
That's right. Yeah, and especially as Catholics, I was just meeting with the family life and pro-life, director of our diocese recently, and I just said, like, "This is really a pro-life issue." And, like, as Catholics, if we believe in life from conception to natural death, then someone who has had a miscarriage, I don't if it was 6 weeks along or 5 weeks along, which we've had those, they lost their child. It wasn't just a sickness for a while, it was a loss that they will be thinking about and grieving, or just and it's a different kind of loss because it's like a loss forward, right? It's like you always
Mhm.
wonder what would they be like in our life if they were part of our family, you know? So you're not remembering them, you're just carrying that emptiness into the rest of your life, which is like a backwards from you when your grandfather dies, where you're
Right.
remembering where they were. And so it's a hard grief to try to explain to people who don't understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of things that are
Yeah.
difficult, today we're going to talk about navigating difficult relationships.
Yeah, sorry with that. Yeah, let's just
Do
get all
not
this done.
apologize. I love it. We'll have to have you back just to have that whole conversation.
Yes.
What has your experience been with difficult relationships?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, to be honest, it actually ties together a bit, I think, because, well, because I grew up in a home where I believe that one of my parents may have had a mental illness. And so the way I sort of learned to be around this parent was was good for me at the time. It helped me survive that experience. Not like literally survival, but, just be able to endure it. But I learned as I got older that I had developed some ways of interacting with people that were unhealthy, really.
Mhm.
And so I really think that that came to a head where it was sort of a make or break situation during the experience of our loss of our twin daughters, our Bridget, right? So, and I was mentioning this before, but when someone goes through an experience like that, a lot of times their relationships are sort of tested, and you can see where the strong ones will last and the ones that aren't that strong are going to fall apart, or just really struggle to get through a difficult situation. For us, it was the loss of our children. It might be, so if someone's spouse dies or someone has a difficult diagnosis, it's really like a time when you sort of learn who your friends are. You learn who your support group is. And sometimes it's terribly disappointing and another thing to have to grieve when the people that you thought were in that group are not the people that are actually in that group. And so I learned that, or at least I kind of always suspected, but I really had that relationship shook out in such a way that I couldn't maintain the relationship with my parent and heal from the losses that we had, right? I had to sort of hunker down a little bit because of the way it was shaking out, that they were wanting it to be about me helping them through the situation when I had 3 little boys and I was hardly able to get out of bed, just keeping my head above the waters of grief. And I realized that I couldn't maintain that relationship. It had been a pretty one way. And when you're in a situation that is sort of about you. Like you have to be it has to be about you getting through it. Those kind of relationships tend to have to fall by the wayside out of necessity. And so I was surprised to find that I was surprised and actually like relieved and validated to find that I was not the only person who, after going through a loss like that, did have that fallout with like especially close people in their family. And it was heartbreaking. So yeah, I had to figure out how to navigate that. I had to figure out what does a healthy friendship look like and what should I expect of people because I tended to be a people pleaser and
Mhm.
really wanted people to like me. I saw my validation in other people. Like these are the unhealthy behaviors that I had acquired as I was growing up. And then I realized I felt constantly disappointed by people's friendship that they maybe weren't thinking the same way of me or they weren't l-
Mhm.
maybe think investing as much into the relationship as I felt like I was and then I always felt let down and I just came to this realization that I was expecting too much of them. Like I was expecting things that like a regular person maybe isn't capable of giving. And so I think it just turned on the light switch that and I think our loss really helped. If I can looking back on it, I can say it helped. At the time, it felt like it was just more to grieve that
Mhm.
these people that I hoped would be there for me were not. And I felt like I'm already grieving so intensely. This is just more loss to grieve. But after the intense grieving, we sort of come to this place of recognizing that like you've been leveled. I just felt like a tornado had come through and we I was just leveled. But I realized that it was almost an opportunity to sort of reevaluate things in the rebuilding process and to decide does this need to be tweaked or fixed before it goes back in or do I even want to put this one back in? It was in hindsight an opportunity to sort of do a renovation. It just gave me a chance to sort of pick through the rubble and decide what was worth fixing and keeping, or what was okay as is, or what needed to go. And so a lot of my behaviors needed fixing and keeping.
Mm.
And some of my relationships needed to go, and some of my behaviors needed to go. So I have been the cause of difficult relationships. I have been sort of the recipient of difficult relationships. And I think that the work that I did well, I worked with many counselors to understand even what healthy looks like because I had a bit of a well, I guess just a bit of a skewed look or a skewed perception of what a healthy relationship looked like. So I got a lot of counseling and help through that time and help processing the relationship elements of our loss as well as just the grief and things. And then I think when I started doing some mindset work with my coaching training, I just even recognized how my thoughts were affecting my relationship. And my husband came through some training with me and our eyes were just opened at like understanding our temperaments and how we were of course, you learn pretty early on in marriage, like, how different you are from your spouse, right? You do things way differently than I do. But even just almost celebrating those differences and recognizing where my strengths helped his weaknesses and his strengths helped mine, you know? So, I'm opening up a whole new thread of conversation, but
No, it's good.
I think that learning the reason cycle and how I sort of had expectations or evaluations of him that I wasn't maybe communicating and how important that is to do in relationship. All of those things just opened my eyes to how to be healthier in my relationships. And I recognized that I could use it in my relationship with my husband and my children. I could use it in my relationship with myself. Like, what am I thinking about myself? And why am I talking to myself this way? Those kinds of things. So,
Yes.
yeah, I think it was all related.
Yeah, and this is kind of a loaded question because there are so many relationships. We have relationships with the people
So
that we live
many.
with, relationships
Yes.
with the people that we work with, familial relationships, parents that we no longer live with, but there's
Mhm.
still
Yeah, in our
trauma
lives. Yep.
or impacts from those relationships. And some of these can be very, very complex. And just like you said, temperaments play into them. I want to go back to one of the first things you said, though. You were talking about your relationship with your mother and the challenges that came with that, which in my brain, the word coping kept coming to me. When
Yeah, oh,
we
yeah.
are presented with a situation, this is human nature. In order to survive, we find coping mechanisms to
Yeah,
help us
that's
get
it.
through the pain or literally survive.
Yeah. I don't even know that it was even painful for me at the time. It was like I just learned quickly if I behave like this, then she will not get mad at me. It was like it's just our brains are so amazing that they quickly understand what do I need to do to keep this person happy? You know, if there
Mhm.
is a way to keep them happy. Yes.
Yes, like,
Yeah,
I don't
so
want to
right.
get yelled at,
That's
so
it.
I'm thinking of my dad. I don't wanna get
Me
yelled at.
too.
I'm going to remember to do the dishes because I don't wanna get pulled out of my bed and screamed at.
Yeah, no, it was the same for me. It was the same, kind of tiptoeing around. But then it leaves you with this, like I said, the people pleasing, right? Like I just have to keep this person happy. I can't just do what I want. I mean, so sometimes I don't want my kids to just do what they want. I want them to do what I want them to do. But it was like to an extreme.
Mhm,
I recognized later. But then it also left me with a a hyper vigilance. Like, now I have to make sure I do everything so I don't get yelled at. And when you're a kid, you don't remember all the things.
mm,
So you get yelled at and then you're like, "You should have done better," to myself, I would think that, and then in adulthood, I'm like, "Why can't I ever put my shoulders down?" I remember going for a massage one time and they were like, "I have never felt like my trapezius muscles, right, these ones here at the top of your shoulders, I've never felt harder muscles than these," the therapist said. I was like, "Really?" And I do find myself in the day just sort of like clenched, just clenched up and shoulders up, and it's okay. I like telling myself, like, "You're not gonna remember everything." There's gonna be things that you mess up on in life,
mhm.
and that's okay. That only came, I wanna say, in my 30s. I finally learned that about myself, which was a lot of years of clenching,
Yes.
just thinking and being afraid of like, "But what if I can't remember everything?" Yeah.
Yeah. So relationships are difficult because we have past experiences that have taught us to behave in a certain way to get a certain outcome. They
Yes.
also are difficult, I believe, because of our natural inclinations, our temperaments, right? So women listening to this are often the goal achievement, perfectionist oriented women. And
Yes.
relationships can be difficult because our brains don't always turn off when we are engaging in
Mm.
conversation with people. They're thinking about all the things that we didn't get done. And so we're there, we're listening, but we're not really taking it in to respond. I think this is also just a mom thing because you've got so much going on. And
Mhm.
then there's also, if we were to think of temperaments, the choleric driven person who just isn't always in tune with other people's emotions around them. And they're so focused on the goal that they forget about the people around them and that they have feelings. And that
Mhm.
also, on the flip side, can happen to us as well, where we're in an environment where someone else is so focused on the goal that they are not paying attention to our feelings and the way that we are feeling run over as well. I know I've been in both of those situations. I've just like you
Yes.
said, you've been the person that's the hard one or the cause of the hard relationship, and you've been the person who
Yeah,
where the
that
other person
right. That's it.
is there. And so I just think that this is fascinating and something for people to recognize that your relationships are the way that they are because of you, but also because the other person has experiences and temperaments. And
Yes.
they may not be doing the same work that you are doing. This is something that comes up in
Yes.
coaching a lot is just this awareness like, I've done all this work. I'm doing all of this work and I can see it, but they can't see it. Well, no, they can't see it because they haven't done the work yet. They just
Yes.
don't know.
Yeah, I think that it took me a long time to recognize that everyone is carrying their own trauma or their own,
Mhm.
they're looking at everything through a certain lens of their past experiences. And so you're right, it's interesting because I am a melancholic first, but my secondary is choleric. So I've been like literally on both sides of that coin.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I think most of my experience is through that melancholic, very sensitive lens. It took it took distance and time away from my mother. I don't remember if I mentioned that it was a mother, but yes, you're right, it was my mother. I took some distance and time away from her to be able to feel compassion for her and
Mm.
to see instead of resentment for the way she was treating me, I had to set that healthy boundary, which was also it's just another huge element in relationships for keeping them healthy is boundaries. And it had to be a pretty firm one with her. Not everybody needs a firm one, but hers did. And but that time and space and that let me heal the wounds that she had inflicted then gave me the ability to see that she is acting out of her own experiences too, and that she's doing things that worked for her when she needed them. And now they're not working for her in her relationships. And maybe I pray someday God will draw her to that awareness that she'll say, oh, I'm still doing these things and I don't need to still be doing these things. So I don't know if that will happen, but it might. But really, I feel like now I can detach a bit from her emotionally and needing like validation from her and needing her to treat me well because I truly believe that she's doing everything she's capable of doing. So having the recognition that yes, we have different temperaments, but also we all are acting out of our own frames of reference, which are through our own experiences. And so giving her it even almost let me the compassion I felt for her also sort of gave me a way to maintain her dignity, like she's doing the best. It was hurtful to me still, but I don't think I didn't take it personally as much after I had some space to heal. And it
Right.
was like, it was just her needing whatever control or because it was what kept her feeling safe on the inside too.
Ooh,
So,
yes, I love that. It is what keeps
yeah,
us feeling safe.
yes.
Before I ask you this next question, I just want everyone listening to remember that everyone's situation is unique. And so
Mhm.
anything that said we can't diagnose or analyze anyone's relationship
Nope.
because everything is so unique and there's so much that plays into it. But can you give us examples, maybe things that we would see in a healthy relationship versus unhealthy relationship?
Yeah, well, I think boundaries is a great starting place because we set boundaries to protect things that we value, right? And maybe we're having dinner together as a family or family like peace and harmony in our home. Like that's something that my husband and I value. And so if someone invited us to an event, well, I'll just say my youngest is 5 now, so it's a little bit different. But even when she was like a toddler, we had toddlers. If they invited us to something that was going to be happening later in the evening, might need to say no to that because our children, they were early risers, so they had to have early bedtimes, right? So a healthy response from somebody would be like, I recognize that you are doing what your family needs to do, and I'm not going to take your declining our invitation personally. Maybe
Mhm.
it'll work out another time, right? So that we can do it. But an unhealthy response to that would be to get defensive and upset that maybe you're not coming to my event and then to see it through this maybe perspective of like why don't you love us, you don't want to spend time with us, you know what I mean? It's sort of they're they're projecting their reasons onto you and I, I just feel like boundaries is a perfect example and almost maybe like a perfect test for a relationship when you can say a no. Preferably without even giving an explanation, but if you felt that you needed to give an explanation, you could. But if you could say a no, thank you, like we are going to do XYZ instead, that's a good test for relationship health because if someone said, no, I can't make it to your thing, I would say, okay, maybe we'll see you next time. but I have learned that because I think earlier in my life, if someone said I can't make it, I would have taken it personally and been
Mhm.
perhaps offended, right? So, yeah, I think a healthy relationship has, some give and take. It recognizes that, each person needs to kind of make some allowance for what's in their own interest. If we
Mhm.
recognize that we're always making decisions in the other person's interest and we can't maybe verbalize our own, that would be a red flag for not a healthy relationship. Or just the way, do you feel free to be authentic or say your opinion or say you don't like something? I've been in relationships where you can't say that with people without them being offended and upset. So that would be another indication that something's maybe off.
Yeah. So I'm hearing healthy relationships look for the freedom to establish boundaries to protect the things that you love, the freedom
Yep.
to be authentic and be yourself and say what you think without
Yeah.
worry about a defensive response or a manipulative response
Yes.
or something that's going to make you feel bad. Now, with that, we also just have to recognize, like you said, you're melancholic. So someone may have said something in the past and you maybe ruminated on it like, oh my gosh, they don't like me. So now I need to act
Mhm.
differently. And so just
Mhm.
being really objective about what did they actually say versus what am I thinking that they said about me.
Yes, I think one of the things that we learned in coaching, I mean, we learned so much about managing our thoughts. And so, um, I don't love everything she says, but I think about something that Brene Brown said, in one of her books, or I'm sure she probably said this a lot. I can't remember which book it was that it's jumped out at me. But she said that when she and her husband have a conflict, and they are going to talk about it, she starts the conversation by saying to him, "The story I'm telling myself is that you didn't want to be with me, or like, but
Hmm.
starting it off like that is her acknowledgement that this is how it's playing out in my head, or this is the way I'm thinking it, or the lens I'm viewing it through." And then that's where he can go, "Oh, no, 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 it was really this," so she can just say why she's upset about something, it's because I'm telling myself that this is what's happening, and then give him the opportunity to say, "Is this right? Am I right here? Or correct me where I'm wrong?" And I think my husband and I learned that and recognized that we were doing that to each other. We were sort of assigning a motive to each other in either decisions that we made or things that we said, or we were hearing it through because he came from his own family upbringing of the way they interacted with each other too, which probably, we all have some, I don't know about all of us, but we all have our family of origin has its own way of doing things. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
And so we bring that into our marriage, right? Our other relationships. And so for us, that's our normal because that's what we grew up with everybody doing. And that's the system that we were in. And so we bring that system along with us and we expect the other relationships to sort of carry out that same system. So I had my system and he had his system and we brought it together. And of course, they weren't the same. We have a loving relationship. We love each other very much and never really had any like really huge blow ups that like separated us or brought us close to separation. Thank you, by the grace of God, that is. But we have had plenty of times where one of us said or did something and we assigned a motive to that thing, right? We said, like, you're only doing that because da, 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 in our minds, that's what we're thinking. And so I think learning to challenge those thoughts, because that was in my system, someone would only do that when they were being passive aggressive or doing whatever. And in his system, I would only do this if I was mad at him or da, da, da. It was just like
Hmm.
we had our systems there, for lack of a better word. And so we were viewing everything through that and then learning to, first of all, challenge that and be like, wait, what am I making this mean? Right? What's the story I'm telling myself? Like Brene
Yep.
Brown says. And then to be like, is that even true? Like, is that what my husband is Patrick, was that how Patrick thinks about me? Is that even true? Like, he doesn't even care about your feelings, like you have these thoughts that are just in there. And we, of course, have even an enemy who's like always wanting to break us up or ruin our marriage. So he's always whispering and adding to them too. So they're just so many things in there that we can have the opportunity to put the brakes on and say, wait a minute, what am I telling myself about this? What does this mean? Is this always how he is? Or is this just, are we having a rough situation that maybe we just need to talk about and say, the story I'm telling myself is this. Is this correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the story I'm telling myself is that my husband doesn't want to come to bed with me because he doesn't like me or he doesn't want to spend time with me or whatever. Reality, my husband
Yeah.
is in a super stressful season at work.
There it is.
He likes to unwind by watching TV and he keeps falling asleep on the couch
Yes.
versus
Yeah.
the actuality of
Exactly.
I want to go to bed earlier because I have to get up earlier. I did not
Yep.
ask him to come to bed.
Yes. Yeah,
I have
yeah, you
not
know, it's
communicated.
uncommunicated.
Yes.
Yes,
I
yes,
didn't
yes, yes.
communicate that it
Oh,
bothers me.
we have lived that situation out a lot of times, like that exact one. Yeah, but it's always like different things. Like he's coming home late from work. Doesn't he know I'm making dinner? He's not even respecting my time. I work so hard. It just builds up, and he's just like, I was in traffic. I don't know. Like he walked in the door, and I'm already mad at him, right? Because I've
Oh,
already
yeah.
told myself this story, and he's just like, I don't know what are you doing? We brought that in to our marriage, of course, and I think everybody does. So, just learning to challenge that before it spins into a fight. We just build it up in our minds so much, and we're not even aware that we're doing it, I think, a lot of times, you know? So, like, bringing that awareness online, let's just put on the brakes a little bit. Could this be true? Could it not be true? Could something else be true? You know, all of those things are.
Hey, friend, you are climbing the ladder of success, but somewhere along the way, you've lost sight of yourself. You've been told that perfection is the goal, that productivity defines your worth, and your brain has been taught to believe that praise is the ultimate validation. But what if there's another way? A way to break free from the chains of praise, perfection, and productivity. Imagine living with purpose, not just pressure. Finding balance between your ambitions, your prayer life, and your family relationships. Hey, this is Kylie here, and my one-to-one coaching is designed specifically for high-achieving Catholic women like you who are ready to embrace their true worth, not in what they do, but in who they are. Come join me for a free confidence and clarity call by clicking the link in the show notes. Step into a life where you are more than enough, where your achievements serve your soul and your soul serves your purpose. And this
Those great
applies
questions.
to coworkers. It applies to
Oh, yeah,
friendships as well.
absolutely.
This
Yes.
same thing all
Yeah,
works. Why didn't my administrator email me back? I emailed them 2 weeks
yeah.
ago. I still haven't heard anything back. I used to hear this all the time of they never get back to me. They're a terrible person, blah, 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 blah. Did you go down
Well,
and talk to them? Maybe they didn't get it. Maybe it went to their spam folder. They probably get 100 emails a day.
yeah,
Maybe
or the
someone
I was gonna
else.
say, yeah, the choleric might think they're a terrible person, but the melancholic's gonna be like, "They hate me. What did I do wrong?" Like, and they'll be analyzing every single thing they did, and, like, maybe they're mad at me because of this or what, you know, like, it's just we just spin out. We spin out in a
Yeah.
story. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so another thing that you brought up that I wanna focus on because this comes up a lot. You talked about when trauma happens or when there's a difficult relationship, sometimes we lose friends,
Mhm. Yeah.
which can be difficult. So I'd love to hear your take on when that happens, how to navigate it, but also the flip side, when is it time to end friendships?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. Okay, yes. I could speak to both things. Because I deal with grieving mothers a lot, I think and I experienced this myself, I think that they are surprised to learn that they're not the only ones who have had this sort of relationship fallout, but it really happens to a lot of people who are going through something intense and traumatic or I mean, maybe not traumatic. I think that word is overused, but it like an intense, difficult situation, intensely difficult. Okay, so the first question is losing
Yeah, how do you manage
friendships.
losing friendships?
How do
How
you
do you
manage?
just keep a positive, like, healthy view of yourself in that scenario?
Yeah, that's hard. I definitely had people that I thought would be there who just disappeared, like disappeared. And I think it took me a while to realize that they didn't know what to do. They
Mhm.
didn't know what to say. So we had we had lost twins and one after the other. Like we had a stillbirth and then one was in the NICU and then she died too. So I think that time having passed since that experience gave me the realization that a lot of times people don't know what to do when someone's going through something really intense like that. And they don't know about meeting them in the pain or just being with them in the pain and discomfort, like I can't fix it. So I think they just drop away because they're like, I can't do anything to help this, instead of just coming in and being like, I can't fix it, but I'll be with you,
Right.
this sucks. Um, there's there's no two ways about it. It's just terrible. It's something that you also have to grieve along with whatever the difficult diagnosis or loss or whatever it is that you're going through. You definitely have to grieve that. And it can feel really personal at the time when you're raw and sensitive like that. But I think that that same thing holds true that we were talking about with what's the story I'm telling myself, that they don't love me or they weren't really true friends or whatever. I think oftentimes we have to remember that a lot of people don't know how to navigate that. They just don't. There's so many articles and pieces written by child loss, or that's my wheelhouse is child loss, but there's so many pieces written about it that I know that what and here's what not to say to someone who just lost a child, or here's what. So, but I think it applies universally when someone is going through something and they are just in the valley, like down in the valley, saying something is better than saying nothing. That's tip number 1, I guess. And not trying to fix it or give platitudes to try to make them feel better, but just saying, "This is awful, and I'm so sorry. I wanna be here for you however I can." So, I guess I'm giving advice sort of as the one accompanying somebody, but I think the one who's in the valley needs to recognize that there's a lot of people who don't know how to do that. And I think that's the only way to process it is to recognize that it's not personal. They don't have the skills. They don't
Yeah,
have the tools for that, for how to handle it. Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's so important, and it really does shift the perspective of it's not that they don't want to help me, maybe they just don't know how.
They don't have any idea. Yep. Yeah, and sometimes and sometimes the friendships, like, just never come back, truthfully, like, that's how it is. I think it creates a kind of an uncomfortable situation maybe, and then it just never is the way that it was.
It reminds me in my coaching sometimes we'll talk about this, and I know I've been taught this through my spiritual direction classes, and we talked about it when I was going through my master's in ministry is you're going to go on this spiritual transformation journey
Yes.
and the people around you are not.
That's
And you're
it.
going to want to talk about
Absolutely.
it and they aren't going to understand. And I think the same thing happens when we grieve. We're going on a journey
100%.
and we are
Absolutely.
changing and other people can't understand. And that's
Yes.
okay. We've changed in a way that they can't relate to, and maybe that's just the Lord's way of saying, "I'm growing you into something different, and I'm gonna give you a different community." And we can
Yes,
mourn that
yes.
loss, but we can also just say, "Thank you, God, for having them in that time, and thank you, God,
Yeah.
for who you're gonna bring me next."
Yeah, and I think this is something that just came up even, like, it's one of my topics for the end of the year, but I think normalizing seasons of our life is a good thing. We resist a change of season and think, I was really productive and I have to keep being productive, or like this was going really well and now something's, and that happens in our prayer lives, that happens in our spiritual lives. There's times of dryness and times of fruit and it can feel up and down. But I think that's true of relationships also. And there's times that people are in your life for a certain season and then God either brings them away or brings you away and that season changes and they're they're not in your life anymore. And maybe it wasn't a fallout, like you didn't have a falling out, but it was just seasonal and allowing that to be a normal thing and not resisting it and just trusting that God will bring us the people we need for the different seasons and he will let them go during the different seasons. And instead, I think we struggle to hold on to them and maybe beyond the season. And another thing that really irks me is social media because I think it artificially create lengthens relationships that would otherwise have fizzled out, or maybe it was time to let that season pass, but then these people are just in your feed or in your life or commenting on what you're doing for like so many years beyond when they probably otherwise would have been in your life. That
Yes.
I think that that's a challenging thing to navigate right now in this, like, I guess I'm old enough to just say this, like, this newfangled technology, but, like, like, just all of the ways that technology has exacerbated that that situation, and how much harder it is even kind of letting people just fade out when they're just constantly in your business on social media or something on the internet. So, um, yeah, that adds another layer of complication to the season's idea, but sometimes we just, whether we're growing past someone else, like you mentioned, or, it's just time, we just took different paths. But it doesn't mean necessarily that we're maturing spiritually. It just means that, like, we're taking a different path. Like,
Yeah.
there was
Just like
there
you
was
do after
a
high
fork in
school,
the road, and there it is.
you go to
Yes.
college, you form new friendships, you graduate,
Yeah.
you get married, and that changes dynamics. It's a new season. You have kids, that's a new season. You are gonna surround
Yes.
yourself with people who are going through similar stages because
That's
that's
it.
the community that you need. You need somebody who can understand and relate.
Yeah, and I
So,
think that keeping that normal, that will change many times. I'm 50 years old now. That has shifted so many times in my life. That's normal. That's how it is. Like, that's okay.
yeah. So when we recognize that maybe it's time to end a friendship, something's just
Yes.
really not healthy, it's not good for our mental health, it's not good for our family. Do you have any tips for ending a friendship?
Well, I have had to do it. I didn't always do it gracefully. I've learned, since doing it, I've learned some more graceful ways. I think a boundary, getting more solid on a boundary helps to helps to create the break.
Mm,
There's someone who's always crossing what you may or may not have communicated as a boundary, but you've always feel like they're crossing a line. Let's put it that
mhm.
way. Crossing. You know how sometimes you feel that before you actually get
Yes.
clear on what the boundary was that they crossed, right?
Mhm.
You just feel like, they're always like doing. So the first thing I would recommend is getting really clear on what what was it that they did that bothered you, right? Like, what was it that thing, that line that they crossed, Because sometimes we it's sort of nebulous and we just are like, "Yeah, that irked me, but I can't verbalize why it did." So try to verbalize it and get clear on it. And then if you can communicate with them, and if they're willing to say, "Oh, I didn't even realize that was bothering you. I'm sorry. I'll not do that." That's one type of person. But a lot of times if you communicate that with somebody, they might say, like, I'm gonna do this anyway. This is what I wanna do. So, it demonstrates that that relationship is not a give and take relationship. It's not healthy for someone if you say to someone that something's bothering you, for them to not, make an accommodation for that, right? And to say, I'm, there are definitely times when we do things that bother someone and they don't know. So when you communicate it and they say, I'm so sorry, I'll change. I won't do that again, that's one direction, but the other direction is that they totally ignore that and don't want to make a change, and that would be an indication to me that maybe we're at an impasse here in our relationship, And so, after having expressed, what your wish is and they have ignored it, um, or maybe you could even say, like, "If you do this again, then I am going to do this," right? Because our boundaries have to be what we're going to do, not like, "You're not allowed to do that to me again." That's
Right.
not a boundary because that's like trying to control something that's out of our control. That's on them. We can't control their behavior. But we can say, "If you do that again, here's what I'm going to do." Right? I'm not going to want to call you anymore and we're not going to spend time together. So I think that's a healthy way to communicate that. It's very scary and very uncomfortable sometimes the first time you do it. But I think just being honest with the person and saying, "This bothered me. Are you willing to accommodate this, and you can usually tell from their reaction whether they're going to accommodate it or not. And then sometimes it's worth communicating it to them, and sometimes it's not worth communicating that, and you just are gonna let that be a friendship that
Kind of
is
fizzle
out of
out.
season. Out of season. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna fizzle out on its own. Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard verbalize the boundary that is being crossed because sometimes we don't know what it is or we've never said it to them. So they don't
Yeah.
know
Or
what the
something
problem
just
is.
felt icky about that, like, why did that rub me the wrong
Yeah.
way?
So be
Like,
very
figure that out.
specific, verbalize it, communicate it to them, and then let them know the consequence of them violating that boundary and then hold that boundary. That's the important part. You have to stick to that boundary.
You have
So
to stick to it.
this is a common problem I've seen come up in a lot of moms groups is having a family member, maybe a mother-in-law or someone who brings a multitude of toys every time they come to your house to give to your kids. And you don't have the
Ah,
space or you want kind of a minimalist
yeah.
environment. And so you verbalize, hey, we really appreciate how much you love our children. However, we do not have the space for this. And it is really important that we have less toys so our kids can use their imagination. We would appreciate it if you did not bring these anymore. If this continues to happen, we will only visit you at your house. Or if this continues to happen, whatever it is that you are going to set as the
Yeah.
follow up.
Well, personally, before I said, like, if this continues to happen, I would just express our preferences. Do you know what
Yes.
I mean? I
Yeah.
would just say, we would prefer not to have so many toys, like, almost like inviting them to get on board with that vision, you know?
Yes.
And then if it happened again, after I had expressed it, I don't know if I would start from
Yes. I
personally,
agree.
myself, I don't know if at the outset I would say, "I don't like this, and if you do it again, I'm gonna do this." Like,
I would
I would
probably it would
just say,
probably take me 3 or 4 times to get there.
yes, me too, me too. I mean, I don't know, that's my melancholic, but, like, sort of, like, wanting to just make sure we're not stepping on toes, but I think I would first just say, "Hey, it's so nice that you're bringing these toys for the kids. It's so fun for them, but we don't have a lot of space, and we're trying to keep them at a minimum, like, maybe we could, if you wanna get them a gift, maybe we could give them an activity together or something to do together, like, even maybe offer an alternative."
Yes.
But then if it was, like, the holiday again and all the toys came again, then I'd be like, "Listen, like, we talked about this. If you can't, respect my our wishes with this, then we're just gonna not have the toys come in the door." Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Or we're
that's
gonna
it. Like,
donate them.
yeah, I'm just gonna meet you. Well, like, it's so hard for the kids too, it
It
feels like
is.
them, they're like, so it's just like, "I'm gonna meet you at the door. If you have a handful of toys, we're gonna just put them back in the car, and then you're gonna come in and we're gonna have fun together."
My
So
mother-in-law does not bring a ton of stuff to her house, but she will bring
yes.
stuff, and it's so funny because my husband will, like, take it back to their house, or my mother-in-law will sneak it in her car, and we'll
Yes,
just
yes. Well, I found that my
trade it
mother-in-law is
back.
cleaning out her space by giving it to us. It's like, "I found all these old pictures and books and things," and, like, bags of them. We're like, "Oh, okay." Like, so, "Thank you, but, like, where do we put them? I don't know where we put them." Yeah. So it's just, sometimes there's a treasure in there. So it just
Yeah,
makes it, a challenge, but just to say, like, "Thank you, but no thank you, and we love you, but please stop doing this," you know?
yeah.
And so yeah, there's a boundary, and you're inviting them to get on board with that, and then you have to make a consequence, which isn't gonna be like a punishment, but it's gonna
Right.
say, "If this happens, we're just gonna have to put it back in your car, or we're gonna have to toss them in the trash because I don't have time to sort through bags and bags of memorabilia." So yeah, so that's what I would recommend for setting that boundary, but you can't do that with your mother-in-law and then have the relationship fizzle out, right? So you
Mhm.
maybe that's one thing to do with a friendship, but it's a little bit harder to navigate when it's your family
Completely.
because you're gonna see them over and over and over, and they might be on board or they might not, but you have to practice setting that consequence and holding to it, and just lovingly holding to it. And if they value the relationship and they respect you, they will eventually get the picture. But if they don't,
Absolutely.
yeah, it can be challenging with family.
And this is really to where I think coaching comes into it as well, or just someone who really
Mhm.
understands the relationship. Yeah, I talk about that with my mother-in-law, but I know between her and my husband, like, she thinks it's hilarious just to push his button. She knows it pushes his button, so she does it on purpose.
Oh,
But
no.
she really doesn't care about what happens to the thing. It's usually from the dollar store. It's more of a, like, I wanna see how mad my son's gonna get, just kind of a thing to kind of push his button.
I don't
And
know if
that's
that's
just the
better or worse. Like,
relationship.
yeah.
She's wonderful. I love her.
Yes. Yeah,
My
yeah.
husband does too. But again, just recognizing everyone's relationship is different.
Yeah,
Ok
but it is hard to do with family, and as someone who did have to actually put a very firm, like, "I can't be in contact with you anymore," relationship in place with my own mother, which is very difficult, very, very difficult, but it was the healthiest boundary that I needed to set
Mhm.
because I had done so much of the inviting, and we could never get on the same page, right? The
Mhm.
invitation was never accepted, let's put it that way. It was always turned down. So I had done that, I mean, countless times over the years, and I did just have to set a firm boundary and hold to it. And another thing that I will say is that you have to seek your validation outside of that person or that
Mhm.
friendship. I think it's really important to, if you are invested in that person liking you or being a people pleaser, then it will be really hard to set a consequence to a boundary because they won't
Right.
like it. That's just all there is to it. So you have to seek your validation from God and from your other healthy relationships, to be able to help you get through those challenging consequences that are, because most people will, if they're not healthy, they will really push back hard against it and be angry and upset.
Mhm.
So there are times when you have to even set those kinds of boundaries, and, talking with people who are healthy and who love you and have your best interest in mind, and seeking validation from them and from God is the way to navigate that.
Yeah. And we know our relationship with the Lord is our most important relationship.
Absolutely.
As a convert, I know you've talked a little bit about how the Blessed Mother has also played a role in your healing and relationships. As we are recording, it is the Feast of the Assumption of Mary. So I just
Yes.
feel very inclined to ask what that has looked like for you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did it because I was just having a conversation with my sister about it recently. She was just saying, "Eileen, I think you're more devout towards Mary than I am," and she converted before I did, but I told her, "Mary met me in a very personal way after our losses." And it was after our losses that I did have to set that boundary with my parents, and I felt, and grieve it, and sort of, the relationship was never healthy, but I think that situation brought it to a head, and it just had to be like, now's the time to, make it was like it 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 was a break in it. So, it needed to happen, and I think that was the catalyst that left me motherless, essentially. I just felt
Mhm.
like, but I still have, like, little children, and I still need support and help. And, like, I don't have, my mother-in-law is not that kind of person. She's lovely, but she's not that supportive, helpful mother-in-law. So I didn't have anywhere to turn, and in my mind, Mary was, like, the last person that I would want to turn to. I couldn't get how people were like, "Oh, just pray, ask Mom and Mary," people would say phrases like that, and I would sort of go, "Ew, I don't get that." And I think it was through my own mother wounding that maybe that was my impression of her, just like, "I don't need another mother, thank you very much."
Mhm.
But I remember I used to get up early and have some coffee in the morning before the toddlers would come down, and I just felt this prompting to pray the rosary that I have never, ever felt before, and I never really even had a good understanding of what the mysteries were, and I didn't really know what they were and how and what goes with what days and that kind of thing. But I just felt like this quiet nudge to pray the rosary, and I listened to it one day. I pulled it up on YouTube, and just prayed along. I knew my Hail Marys. I was baptized and I made my first communion as a Catholic, but then we left after that. And so I did know my Hail Marys and my Our Fathers and my Glory Bees, but I just didn't know what order to pray them in. So it was so comforting. I'll just say that. The rosary is very comforting. And I prayed along with this YouTube video for many, many weeks. before I finally figured it out and learned it myself, but it took a long time. But I just found it was so comforting to do that while I was having my coffee, just pray along, and the repetition, which I had been so irritated by before, was actually like I felt it like comforting now at this time, you know? So there is something about the very thing that bothered me about it was like the thing that ended up being so comforting to me. So during this time of praying the rosary, I also said I learned about a novena to Mary Undoer of Knots.
Mm.
And if you ever read a little bit about that, it just says, "What are these knots?" I think it was by the original person who created the novena. What are these knots in our lives? They're like relationships and just challenges and things that we don't see any way to undo by ourselves. Like they're just so tangled by life that we don't find a way that we can untangle them. And so we offer them to her to just say, "Please untangle these for us." And I remember I sort of put her to the test with that and was like, all right, I've been praying this rosary. Let's see what you can do with this. And my tangles, of course, were like these difficult relationships that I had with my mom or even just my what I said to her was, please untangle and fix the relationship or detach me from the pain that it's causing me.
Mm.
That's literally what I said. You if you can fix the relationship, great. Please do that. But if you can't, please just untangle this it's good like, every day, I would be so upset about it. It was causing me so much grief. Just just untangle the knot that's tying me to the grief with regards to it. And by the end of that by day 9, I felt like a physical weight was lifted off my shoulders. I could feel that she had taken the grief option,
Mhm.
and she had just detached the the responsibility that I felt for trying to fix it. You know, like that's what it was that was causing me so much pain was that I just had this I felt like I need to fix this and I don't know how. I don't know how to fix this. And it was just heavy. It was a heavy weight to carry because you can't totally fix a relationship with someone who's broken in some ways, some ways that they're not interested in fixing. They have to do that work. You can't do it.
Right.
So she took that weight off my shoulders, and I'm telling you, it really, like, almost did feel like a physical weight lifted off, and I recognized in her I'm gonna get choked up, that she was both caring and capable, which were 2 things that I did not have from my own mom. So it was like this care for me and the pain I was in, and a bit able to help me with it, you know?
Mhm.
And so those 2 qualities in her were just what I was missing in a mother. It was just what I needed in a mother. Like, you care about me and you can help me. And so like, after that, I just was like, "I'm in." I just went in with her, just like, "Okay, I need to know more about you." And I ended up, like, making a consecration, and, my whole ministry actually is focused on Our Lady of Sorrows because I think she met me in those 7 sorrows as a grieving mother, and yeah, I just cried because I was like, "I missed all these years of a relationship with you," you know? But I
Mhm.
think I just wasn't ready for it yet, and she knew that I needed to just start really slowly with that rosary, and little by little, she was gonna sort of show herself to me as a loving mother, and she did. And, it was sad to have missed all that time and to have spent so much time being like, "Ew, no, I'm not Mary." Like, it was
Mm.
just I didn't get it. But now I'm just so grateful for, her, and I wish it's sad to me that Protestants don't get to experience her in this
Yeah.
way, because it really was another I was fine with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, that's fine, but I was always just like, not Mary," but it just brought a whole 'nother element of love and tenderness and care into my spiritual life that I had never experienced, and I was so thankful to finally understand it a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story. I know that it has to be difficult to talk about
I love
And
talking about it, but it does
yeah,
also choke me up, you know, like,
yes.
it chokes me up because it was so I felt so loved and seen, you know, like, I think that is, like, that's all really people want in a relationship is to feel seen and loved and, like, have someone care about them even in the midst of a knot or a tangle or a difficult situation that they're going through, you know, and that's just what I got from her.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I definitely grew closer to Mary after my mother passed away,
Mm.
and like you, it really started with the rosary, just an
Oh,
inclination to
wow.
pray the rosary, and I started over Lent. I, too, did not know, even being Catholic my whole life, I had prayed the rosary before, but I didn't know how to lead it on my own without any guidance
Right.
or
Someone tell you the mysteries or what yeah.
yeah, so I just played it in my car on my way to work every day until I knew it.
I can't believe it, really.
Yeah,
That's so similar. Yeah.
yeah,
So
and then led to the
beautiful.
consecration and all those things, so
Oh my goodness.
I think
Yeah.
she just meets us, like you
Yeah,
said,
she
when
sort
we're
of, like,
ready.
opened this little crack for me through the rosary, and then she just pushed the doors open, you know? It was like she just cracked the door a little bit, and then when I was willing to do that, I think she was just like, "Okay, let's open the doors all the way." Yeah. It was
Yes. Okay, before we get to our closing, where I always ask my guests for a prayer tip or a scripture verse, can you tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
yes. So, EileenTully.com. It's like it's just pretty easy, my name. There's my website, and that's kind of the hub for my resources for grieving mothers. I have retreats and things for them. In fact, I have one. Do you mind if I share that I
Yeah,
have
go
one
ahead and
coming
share.
up? I do it it's an online retreat, which people can go through on their own pace, on their own, but I also have usually 3 or 4 cohorts a year, and so I have another small group cohort coming up in September. It starts the week of September 9th, and we meet on Thursday nights at 7:30. So there's information about that on the website too. But yeah, then I also offer because after we go through something like that, remember that when I was in that sort of like picking up the pieces time that I said happened after I got leveled, I remember just being like, now what? What do I do? How do I heal these broken things when I'm trying to put them back together? And so I really was grateful for my coaching training because as I was learning it, I was like, "Oh, this is what I wish I had when I was in that now what time." You know,
Mhm.
now how do I make sense of all this rubble and put the pieces back together? And I think it just gave me like a firm foundation to build on, you know, to that kind of stuff. I want to offer that to people as sort of a firm foundation when they find themselves rebuilding and sort of wondering now what? Like, what does God why did God bring me through that? Or what does he want me to do now that I've been through that loss? So I have things for the grief and loss, and I also have things for healing beyond that.
Wonderful. And you're on Instagram at Present in the Pain, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
And
That's right.
podcasts?
And the podcast is Present in the Pain also. Yep.
Wonderful. So the scripture verse that you gave me was John 15:4. Abide in me as I abide in you, just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me.
Hmm. Do you want me to just tell
Yeah,
you why
why
I
is
picked
that
that
verse
one?
special? Yeah.
Well, I think it actually has a lot to do with those lessons that I learned from my childhood, which was really like, you have to do it all. You have to do everything. And I came to form this sort of self-sufficiency, right? Like this, like everything depends on me. I have to think of everything and make sure I get it all done. Or really, it was tied to what I felt was like my lovability, right? It was just like, if I don't think of everything and get it all done, it left me with this scrupulosity. It left me with this fear that God's not going to love me if I don't remember everything and do everything right. And then when you read a verse like that, it's like, you can't do anything without me.
Yep.
Just like a reminder that, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just striving and striving and striving. And you're like, just stay in me, just abide in me. And you can't do it on your own anyway. So stop trying. So I just love that verse. And I have it actually like over my sink where I do the dishes. So I can look at it and just remember it's not all on my shoulders, right? That weight on my shoulders. It's not all on me. It's just all I have to do is just keep attached to the vine. That's
Yes.
it.
So good. So, so good. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a
Yeah,
joy.
thank you. It's great talking to you. Thanks so much, Kylie.
Beautiful souls, thank you again for journeying with me. If you have been blessed by this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your social media stories, and don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Kylie M. Hein. Stay persistent in prayer, protect your peace, and as always, share the light of Christ with everyone around you.